This brief introduction to indexing is based primarily on my experience of indexing the RAHS collections of photographs and glass lantern slides, but the same principles apply with some variations in application to other collections of items such as books, scrapbooks, and manuscripts. I will also assume that the collection to be indexed has already been scanned and exists in a digital format. The webinar will be structured thus. After providing a definition of and rationale for indexing, I will examine some of the important issues to consider when planning an indexing project. I will then take you through the indexing of a sample image before looking briefly at some of the challenges faced and resources available. First, let me clarify what I mean by indexing. It is the allocation of metadata, the structured data about the digitized item. There are two types of metadata: the technical aspect, which is embedded in the digital file and is created by software, and the descriptive information, that which you assign. It is this latter type that is the subject of this webinar. Descriptive metadata is created when you answer questions such as, who took this photo? Who or what is in this photo? When was it taken? Where was it taken? And who donated this photo? Indexing is essential to the ongoing use and management of digital images. It provides access points for image retrieval, including both the original item and its digitized form. Without comprehensive indexing, images remain buried in a database and will never be seen. It brings context to the digital files and helps make them discoverable when searching online. Proper indexing also allows linking of a database to search engines such as Trove, and it also allows you to easily retrieve original items or digital master copies for exhibitions and imaging or copying services that you may provide to your members or to the public. Before I take you through the indexing of a sample image, I want to look at some of the issues to take into consideration when planning an indexing project. The first of these is design. As part of the planning process, it is important to clarify your expectations of the indexing project and define the design components that are necessary to meet those expectations. What skill sets are required in order to bring your expectations to fruition? Do you have the necessary expertise within your organisation, or do you need to outsource or hire consultants? We are fortunate in the RAHS to have on our executive former archivists and librarians who are able to advise on many technical aspects of the indexing process. It is also important to establish a realistic time frame for the project and efficient workflows. Timeframes will depend on the size of your collection and the number of staff available to work on the index. If there is a deadline, you will need to think about measures to ensure that the project stays on track. What software and hardware resources are required? Do you have physical space for the indexer or indexers to work? What quality control measures will you put in place? How will you ensure that important contextual information and experience gained in the indexing process is not lost to your organisation? I will now look at some of these issues in greater detail. The first thing to consider in designing an index is its purpose. It is useful to think about questions such as, who will use it, what will they use it for, and how will they use it? The purpose of the index may have a bearing on the type of information to be entered into the database. For example, almost a decade ago now, I was involved with the indexing of the New South Wales Aborigines Protection and Welfare Board's records as part of the Aboriginal Trust Fund repayment scheme. This index was primarily aimed at facilitating the repayment of wages to Aboriginal people, held in trust by the New South Wales Government and never repaid, and to provide an ongoing tool for stolen generations researching family history. The type of information index was very specific to these two aims, and access to both the records and the index limited by cultural sensitivities and legal restrictions. These factors, along with the sheer volume of the records, had a significant bearing on the fields and information we chose to include in the index, as well as the choice of thesaurus and software. On the other hand, the indexing the RAHS beyond the Blue Mountains sub-collection was designed to provide free and open online access to out-of-copyright images and other material concerning the European settlement of the central west of New South Wales. in a situation where users may have multiple reasons for and ways of engaging with the images. In contrast to the ATFRS index, one of the intentions behind this project's design was to make the collection available to as wide an audience as possible. The next issue to consider in index design is the access points, that is, how you want your collection to be searched. I just stated that the purpose of an index will influence the types of field included in its design. Similarly, the fields you include in your index will also influence the scope of searches. The inclusion of fields such as geographical region, creator, and image format allows you to easily delimit searches or create sub-collections for specific purposes. In order to make fullest use of a collection, you also need to consider all of the possible ways in which people may use it. Apart from their aesthetic and general interest values, images can serve as valuable research data in disciplines as diverse as history, the social sciences, cultural studies, fashion, art and architecture. It is good to keep this in mind when adding subject keywords and descriptions of image content. Another important consideration when planning an indexing project is whether you will contribute to the National Library's Trove initiative. If you do decide to contribute, you will need to ensure you comply with Trove metadata requirements. A search engine such as Trove specifies standard data elements that it expects from all contributors' collections. This is called a schema. Trove works with two metadata schemata, Unqualified Dublin Core and Picture Australia metadata schema. The Dublin Core schema is a small set of vocabulary terms that can be used to describe web resources such as video, images and web pages, as well as physical resources such as books or CDs and objects like artworks. It specifies 15 fields, 3 of which are mandatory. The Picture Australia metadata schema extended this by 2 mandatory fields. Picture Australia was recently absorbed into Trove, and all new contributors now must use a modified version of Dublin Core that includes the mandatory fields from the Picture Australia metadata schema. The full set of Dublin Core metadata terms can be found on the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative website. Thesaurus also provides standardized subject descriptions that facilitate subject searches across collections. The thesaurus you use will depend on the nature of your collection. For the ATFRS, we use the customized version of the AATSIS thesaurus for subjects related to Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander studies. For the RAHS indexing projects, we use the Australian Pictorial Thesaurus, which is the national standard and preferred thesaurus of Picture Australia. It uses contemporary Australian words and phrases to describe objects, people, places, activities and concepts. It provides a common indexing language for describing pictorial and other collections of Australian libraries, archives and museums. It is an authoritative vocabulary, compiled and maintained on established principles of thesaurus construction. The APT website also includes a comprehensive list of indexing resources. We now turn to software. A key requirement of indexing software is that it has sufficient capacity to handle your collection. It must be able to convert images to standard resolutions and thumbnails for online display purposes and offline storage. It also needs to create dummy files containing stipulated fields ready for data input and link these to the relevant images. And finally, it must have the capacity to upload both image and data file to your website. Other features that are useful and time-saving but not essential are the capacity to pre-fill fields with information that is common to all items in the collection and make global changes to information for a set of images. Of course, you will need a web designer to design a search interface for your collection. When considering website design, it is important to keep in mind compatibility with other collections or sites to which you may want to link. Finally, it is a good idea to ensure that there is adequate training and documentation for ongoing collection maintenance tasks, such as the updating or editing of data and adding new items to the collection. Other important issues to consider are research, quality control and documentation. Many collections have little or no textual descriptions, So image indexing also often requires original research and verification. In other cases, the title on the image may be incorrect. I found one image in our collection that was stated to be the former deaf, dumb and blind asylum at Sydney University, but turned out to be Sizer Castle in Cumbria, UK. It is important that having put resources into digitising and indexing your collection, you put in place adequate quality control measures. Poor presentation, errors and malfunctioning software can detract from the effectiveness of the index in achieving its original purpose and reflect badly on the professional image of an organisation. The most basic but important quality control check is that provided by good proofreading, checking for spelling, syntax and punctuation, as well as formatting errors. It is also a good idea to check the consistency of adherence to standards and application of Thesaurus terms. Over the duration of an indexing project, it is easy for shifts to occur in the way an indexer describes similar or identical subjects. Periodic checks of completed work and constant reference to the relevant thesaurus can help to maintain consistency and add to the coherence of the final product. And finally, does the end product look as you envisaged and/or work as intended? It is a good idea to check both search function and collection appearance in several of the popular web browsers. If any problems are detected that cannot be resolved, you may need to recommend the use of certain browsers. You may also find that what you originally wanted does not work in practice, or that other options suit your needs better. It is important that knowledge and expertise gained through the indexing process is not lost to your organisation, and it is therefore important to document decisions that have been taken and procedures that have been developed as part of the indexing project. Such decisions and procedures represent responses and solutions to problems and issues that you may have encountered, and their documentation forms an important supplement to the index itself. Documenting decisions enhances organisational memory and helps to establish why certain approaches were taken, if a matter needs to be revisited for any reason in the future. Documenting procedures assists in maintaining consistency, especially if more than one person is working on the index, or if the index is added to over time. Software manuals and help files can be notoriously difficult to decipher, and it is also often useful to have these supplemented by the experience of actual users. I will now use the Beyond the Blue Mountains sub-collection as an example and take you through a sample data file and look at specific issues that pertain to different fields. Of course, the appearance and field names may differ from those shown here, according to the needs of your project and the software that you use, but the basic principles are the same. In this screenshot, the center window contains the image to which the input data will be linked. The window to the left contains the list of data fields, and as you navigate through these fields, data can be input into the text box immediately below the image. We will now look more closely at the fields and the types of data that are entered into each section, and some of the conventions that may apply. Some of these are widely accepted standards, and others were formulated as practical solutions to issues encountered in the indexing process. You may have to make similar decisions if you encounter indexing questions for which there is no established convention, or for which there is more than one convention from which to choose. This example is not meant to be exhaustive, and nor do I expect you to remember all of this detail. It is merely intended to give you a general idea of the indexing process. In this example, the fields are shown in the column on the left, and the types of data input in those fields and its relevant conventions on the right. The file number is auto-generated, and in most cases encoded by the software. If the image already has a title, then use that. If the title is assigned by the user, then it is usually placed in square brackets. Access refers to whether the item is for loan or not for loan. The date given here is the date of publication of a book, creation of a photograph or artwork, or compilation of a scrapbook. If this is unknown, then enter not given. Description here refers to a physical description of the object, not its content. For example, glass lantern slide with circular mat, or title in ink on upper edge label. Include any physical damage to the object, such as cracks and tears. In the next field, you would enter all creators, if known, including their years of birth and death. If unknown, then enter unknown photographer or artist or author as appropriate. Format refers to the physical or digital manifestation of the resource, such as photograph, video, or etching. You should include dimensions, resolution, format, materials, and techniques. For example, glass lantern slide, 8.2 by 8.2 centimeters. For topics, you should use your relevant subject thesaurus. In this case, the Australian Pictorial Thesaurus. Make sure you include all major subjects that appear in the image. Try to keep in mind the various ways in which viewers might engage with an image or find it interesting. Location refers to the geographical location that is depicted in the image. Refer to Geoscience Australia website for current official place name spellings. Names refers to those persons that have a significant relationship with the primary subject of the image, such as architects of buildings, and so on. The next field refers to whether the image is in or out of copyright. Here is also where you would include instructions regarding citation or permissions to reproduce. Storage refers to the location of the original item or master copy of the digitized image. Notes is where you would enter a description and fuller identification of the content of the image. This, as well as the title field, may often require research to identify or verify the subject. If the image is a copy, it is also here that you would include details of the source of the original image. Provenance is the place to enter donor and date of donation if known. The collection, sub-collection and catalogue number fields are self-explanatory. We included the region and LGA fields for the sake of users that might want to search by region or local government area rather than individual locations. There are a number of political, administrative, statistical and biogeographic approaches to the division of New South Wales, but for region, we chose to follow the informal divisions that seem to correlate most closely with popular notions. Note that changes in political boundaries may eventually necessitate updating of information in the LGA field. From this actual example, we can see that the image was taken on the 19th of September 1871 and is a sepia carte de visite. We also see from the description field that the title and date come from a cursive ink inscription on the reverse of the image. The creator was Charles Tullett, and the original print is 6.4 by 10.5 centimetres. The major subjects include bark huts and houses, bush, butchers, company signs, general stores, pioneers, and men's and women's clothing and accessories. The image is out of copyright, but permission from the RAHS is required to reproduce the image. It shows a group of men and women posing outside Petherick's General Store and Butcher at 3 Mile Creek, Goolgong. The image was donated to the RAHS by Miss E. Ramsay Lowe in 1946 and forms part of the Lowe family papers in the RAHS manuscript collection. It also forms part of the Beyond the Blue Mountains sub-collection of images related to the central west of New South Wales, where Goolgong is located, in the Mid-Western Regional Local Government area. And this is what the indexed image actually looks like on the RAHS website. Most of the challenges that arose in these projects were software related, and none of them major. We had page-turning software on one document that played the sound of children at the beach, instead of the sound of pages turning. And, as alluded to earlier, there were some issues with specific web browsers. These were all detected and resolved fairly easily in the course of testing. In past projects, I've experienced workflow issues when digitization and indexing of a collection have been undertaken concurrently, and there have been delays in one or the other of the two processes. One of the major challenges from an indexing perspective was the identification of the subjects of untitled or incorrectly titled images. I was fortunate to discover that the State Library of New South Wales holds a collection of Frank Walker negatives with titles and dates that I was able to cross-reference against the RAHS collection of glass lantern slides. Unfortunately, the State Library collection was not digitised, and this was therefore a slow and painstaking process, Despite extensive research, the subjects of a number of images from the collection remain unidentified. However, even if images remain unidentified, they can be indexed as such and provide an excellent opportunity for the public to interact with the collection and possibly identify images, either through your own website or through Flickr or by posting on social media sites such as Facebook. The other major indexing challenge involved maintaining consistency of application of descriptions and thesaurus terms. This was more difficult in the case of the ATFRS, which involved a team of 13 indexers and took over 2 years to complete, and required weekly team meetings and a structured plan of intensive checking of indexers' work. However, I have also found in smaller projects such as the indexing of the Beyond the Blue Mountains collection that my own description of similar subjects may change over time. This is best remedied by regular cross-referencing against completed work and constant reference to thesauri. This brings us to the end of this introduction to indexing. I encourage you to browse the image collections on the RAHS website and the online collections of state libraries and other collections available on Trove in order to get a good sense of how these principles are applied in practice.